Welcome, former U.S. Congressman from Illinois and president of Flannagan Consulting, Michael Patrick Flannagan. Also, let us welcome back our good buddy from Forbes.com, also Sirius XM POTUS 124. Rick Unger is still here. Rick, we all took up that last conversation here. We're going to have to work on that on the hard line very soon. Congressman Flannagan, let me get to you right now, and let me talk about this specifically, because there were a lot of discussions early on that there was going to be some problems in Nevada because of the caucus. Let's be honest. I don't think anybody thought it was going to be this bad right here. If we are able to show, if anybody's able to show that we've got double voting for anybody, doesn't this really force us to throw Nevada right out and start again?
Well, I don't think you can throw anything out and start right again. And I think that most of the double voting complaints are from Rubio's folks who are having trouble with tonight anyway. I'm reminded of that scene from Citizen Kane where they hold up the one newspaper that says, oh, a million votes behind, and then they hold up the other newspaper that says fraud at polls. Let's wait before some of this is verified before we get too cranky about what's going on.
I do understand that, but again, it's coming from a number of media sources here. It's not just coming from one or two. But let's just look at it, because you as a congressman, and let's face it, we talked about Chicago earlier on today. Chicago has a history of where these kind of things were almost bred into the DNA at some points here. Not saying now, but back then at least.
How about, and Chicago and Las Vegas have a very close relationship in an interesting sort of way. So, you know, it's all fair game tonight.
Okay, so then let's make this fair game then. Because if indeed something like this is happening, and if the GOP looks into it, if the RNC looks into it, look, I'm not trying to say that this is going to happen here, and we're not trying to make fun of anybody here, but if this does come up, that there's a real problem here, I understand you can't just go back and write everything again. It's not like you can make a do-over here because of the way the political system is set, but does this tell us in any way, shape, or form that these results coming in are just not valid?
If they can demonstrate actual, real fraud that requires intent, that requires an action, and that requires a bad result, I'm sure the statute in Nevada covers of how to handle that. I'm sure that there's a legal way through this. But to establish that is going to be hard to do. And I'd like to see it done before we get too complaining about it.
Okay, I'll give you that. Rick, let me go ahead and throw this to you, because the congressman makes a great point. All these reports are coming in. Look, I'm watching them here. They've been coming over the Twitter feed all night long. We're getting it from the various networks right now. Are we knee-jerking?
Well, look, you always have to wait and see, you know, when things calm down and you find out what the facts are. I will always agree with that. To reach conclusions without facts is never a good idea. Although, I would be remiss if I did not point out the irony of the fact that it's always the Republicans who are seeking to make the argument that all this voter fraud goes on in various states around the country, often not very well proven, often being used to possibly disenfranchise certain voters. And that's something I'm sensitive to. So to see a Republican caucus having these claims, and again, I do agree with the congressman, nothing means anything until you have verification and proof. And we don't have that yet. If it turns out to be the case, then, you know, it speaks for itself.
Gentlemen, it's the political process in many ways. It's almost like, Congressman, it's a lot of what we talked about earlier tonight on this show. We've been on the air since 9 o'clock Eastern time, and we talked about how some of this stuff that goes on, it's politics. You hate to just shrug your shoulders and say that, but this is just the way things happen in politics, and well, thankfully it happens a little more orderly sometimes in America than in other places.
Sadly but true, and Rick might be right. I mean, the Republican Party may have finally sunk to the level of the Democratic Party, and we're involved in this kind of vote fraud finally. That's a bad thing if that's true.
That was very well done,
Congressman. We're going to make we're going to make you part of this group. I'm telling you, we're going to bring you in here because
I'm a Republican from Chicago. I've done this my whole life.
You just got the best. You got the best shot of the night, my friend. There it goes. All right, look.
You do. You have to be impressed by that.
I do like that, but he's right. I said earlier in the show, I think the ghost of Daley is sneaking out from a door somewhere in Las Vegas going, I got this, guys. It's okay. Don't sweat. Everything's fine. Let's talk seriously about a couple of the candidates here. I want to talk about Ted Cruz, which we have not talked about a lot about this evening. Ted Cruz came out of Iowa looking good. He suffered 2 defeats thus far. He's had a couple of problems here because some of the accusations of liar, liar, campaign on fire are really starting to stick, coming from Donald Trump and others. He fires his longtime campaign spokesman, Rick Tyler, after a news story indicating Marco Rubio said something negative about the Bible. It was blatantly false. It was badly done. There's Photoshop issues coming out here as well about some things that he did with Marco Rubio shaking hands with Barack Obama. Congressman, has Ted Cruz effectively, in many ways, just himself taken the steam out of his campaign and maybe just left so much doubt that even some of the most ardent Cruz supporters at this point are now starting to wonder if this is the guy they want?
I think there's something to what you say, and I think a lot of it also attaches to Cruz himself. And although he may have an overzealous campaign doing these things that he now has to explain, but he's a guy who's incapable of smiling and laughing at himself, of telling a self-deprecating joke, of having a light moment. He's very harsh, he's very ardent, he's very difficult all of the time. And someone like that, it's easy to poke, and when they get poked, it sticks. The reason Reagan was Teflon is because he was able to laugh at himself. Clinton, the same thing. This guy cannot laugh at himself. He is all serious all the time, and he is holier than thou constantly. And that makes it very easy to poke at him. And when it pokes and it sticks, it hurts.
Is that just it? You use the phrase holier than thou in there. And again, I'm not trying to cast any aspersions whatsoever on people of faith, evangelicals, whatever. You're right. Absolutely. That's what I'm saying. We're not doing that. But what you're saying, and I want to make this point, I have spoken to people who are very, very big on their faith. They are evangelicals. And even they have said to me, I'm a little bit concerned. This is not the guy that I thought I was voting for at this point. Some people have even come back to me and they've said, he's sort of trying to be like Donald Trump. And these are people who don't like Trump. Is all this fair? And maybe he just got caught up in this a little too much.
I think maybe he's not ready to run for president. And I think he needs a little more seasoning. And I think he's the one candidate in here who might just not be politically enough ready to do this. Trump has spent a lifetime being the Donald and being a public personality and learning how to do that well. Rubio has spent a long time in the State House. Cruz has spent a long time being a lawyer, and a very successful and a very good one. But being a lawyer is not a way to talk to people. People don't want to hear legalese. People don't want to be lectured. People don't want to have the finger point. And people don't want to hear about how you talk to God every day and once in a while he talks back to you. They don't want to hear this. They want to understand how you're going to lead them and how you're going to make their world a little better and how you are going to be a catalyst to success. And he's not communicated that.
Rick, is that maybe where Marco Rubio succeeded? Because many of the things the congressman just said here, Marco Rubio did not do. He had his points, he made them, but he was still, at the end of the day, and I know this is a dirty word for many people, he was a politician. He knows how to play the game at this point, and he's got people behind him. Marco Rubio may have done the smartest job in the world in laying back and waiting for the game to come to him.
Maybe. I mean, I have to, pick up the thread on Senator Cruz, and I have to say, anybody who reads my column knows that I am no fan of Ted Cruz. And to be fair, and with full disclosure, Senator Cruz is no fan of mine ever since I wrote the column where I referred to Senator Paul and Ted Cruz's Pinky and the Brain, if you happen to know that cartoon. So, he's never been somebody who I've seen as a genuine person. He's so easy to mistrust, and if you really track him carefully through his Senate history, there's a picture that emerges that makes me exceedingly uncomfortable. Marco Rubio, there is a lot to Marco Rubio that hasn't been discussed. There's a story there that hasn't been told. And I think that when that story is told, a lot of people are going to be extremely uncomfortable with his history. No one's really gone hard on Marco Rubio. Ted Cruz has kind of tried to, but he's done it in a restrained fashion because there are a lot of people in his own camp that keep saying, go a little easier on Marco Rubio. So he's got a lot to face up to also. Not the best candidate, as it turns out, but you'll see that when it's time for you to see that.
Let me ask this. Matt Towery, who's a pollster and an author, was on the show earlier tonight. And he actually said, which shocked a lot of people, even the people on the panel, he said he really believes that when the ticket comes around, it will be Trump Cruz. And that would be the smartest ticket. He stands right on this. Congressman, let me get to you first.
He's wrong.
Because, okay, I'm coming to you. Don't worry about it, Rick. You're coming in there. I'm going to the congressman
wrong.
first. Is he wrong? Congressman, first of all, Trump Cruz. Do you see that happening?
No. It's two of the same. And not that they're the same sort of guy. A lot of Rick's criticism of Cruz is correct, although I believe Cruz is actually honest. I mean, straightforward. He's not hiding. He's not dodging. He tells you what he does. He just does it in such an unpalatable way you can't swallow it. But I don't think you're going to have Trump-Cruz. It's like having Trump-Trump, only one of them is disagreeable. I think you're going to have Trump-Carson. I really think that's the guy. They want to sew up that end of the vote. Carson is the guy. And from my perspective, there's 2 votes at work in the Republican caucus here, in the Republican conference. 2 votes. The anti-establishment vote, which is about 60% of the voters. The polls bear that out. The votes we've had so far bear that out. And the Rubio section, the establishment section, is about 40%. And now that's coalesced around Rubio. You're waiting for the other portion to coalesce. I think it'll eventually coalesce around Trump. I'm a Carson guy, full disclosure, but I think Trump would be great to pick up Carson, that piece of the vote, bring it to him, and that makes him untouchable in the primary context. And Carson is a great asset in a general election.
Makes a lot of sense.
I think that's actually the choice.
30 seconds to you, Rick. Make a lot of sense to you?
It's an interesting analysis, I have to say. Look, I mean, I completely agree. There's no way that it's Trump-Cruz for all the reasons, excuse me, the congressman said. I'm not as sold on Trump-Carson. Listen, Carson brings a balance and personality. He's an exceedingly nice man. I've interviewed him. I like him. But I think he presents Donald Trump with a Sarah Palin possibility that Trump himself has, a Sarah Palin possibility. If it's me, I'm saying that it's Kasich.
All right, gentlemen, we are still waiting to hear what happens in Nevada. And again, I'm so glad that we settled that for a moment. It's like, everybody calm down. It's just Nevada. It's okay. Don't worry about it. We got a long way to go, kids, even though the networks are all screaming about it. All right, hang on a sec. Michael Patrick Flannagan, Rick Unger. Gentlemen, please stand by. We're going to come right back to you. Polls close at 9 o'clock local time, midnight Eastern time. And all we're hearing thus far is a lot of people saying they're unhappy with the government. We'll continue our coverage next.